Admiral Kelthorin sat in his chair with bad posture. His body showed signs of many years of military service. His face had scales and many scars from battles. The dim light in the room made his scars more visible. Around him were 12 young
officers who had just finished school. Their eyes were wide with hope and not much experience. "You asked for war stories, young ones?" The Admiral's voice was rough through his translator.
"Fine. But I will not tell you about our great wins against the Screeny Horde or our clever battle plans in the Proxima Nebula campaign." His 4 eyes got smaller, and the inner 2 eyes blinked slowly. "Tonight, I will tell you about the humans." The young officers began to whisper to each other. Humans were new to the Confederation. It had been only 200 years since first contact. Their area in space was small, their ships were not impressive, and their technology was mostly borrowed. "From others, sir," said Lieutenant Zanzar. "The humans, but they are just helper forces at best." The Admiral laughed, but it was not a happy laugh. "That is the most dangerous thing you can think in the whole galaxy, Lieutenant. I was in charge of the 8th Fleet during the Terran incursion. I was there when we first saw what their military could do." He waved to a robot server for a drink of fermented Nula juice. "The humans have a saying, things are not always what they seem. No species shows this more than they do." "Is this about their lieutenant?" "What was his name?" asked another officer. "Lieutenant Frank Miller," the Admiral said. The human name sounded strange when he said it. "Yes, that's where our learning began. But before I tell you about Lieutenant Miller, you need to understand something basic about humans." The Admiral leaned forward. His voice got quieter, but somehow it filled the room. "In this galaxy, there are hunter species and prey species. Most thinking races came from one or the other. The Variks came from pack hunters. The Kulari came from herd animals that eat plants. We Thorin came from water creatures that hide and then attack suddenly." He stopped talking for a moment to let his words sink in. Humans came from something else entirely. They were persistence hunters. They did not use claws or poison or great strength. They simply would not stop. Their prey would run, and humans would follow for days, until the prey fell down from being too tired. The Admiral finished his drink. This never giving up, this refusal to stop, it is the base of how they fight in wars. And I learned what it costs at the Battle of Sigma Octantis. Everyone was quiet for a moment. Then the Admiral began to speak again. "Most species in the galaxy evolved to either run away from danger or to attack quickly and win fast. Humans did neither. They came from animals that would chase their food for days, never stopping, never giving up, until the animal they were hunting simply could not run anymore." The young officers looked confused. "Think about what that means," the Admiral continued. "Most predators need to be faster or stronger than their prey, but humans don't. They just need to be more stubborn. They can be slower and weaker and still win, because they don't give up." One of the officers raised a hand. "But surely in modern space warfare this means nothing. Ships fight with advanced weapons, not by chasing each other." The Admiral's outer eyes narrowed. "You would think so. I thought so. The Dravid certainly thought so. We were all wrong." He stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the stars. "Humans bring this same mindset to everything they do, including war. While we seek quick, decisive victories, they are prepared for long conflicts. Where we expect enemies to surrender when defeat is logical, humans see no battle as lost until they are dead." The Admiral turned back to face the young officers. "Their history is full of examples. Small human forces defeating much larger enemies through sheer refusal to accept defeat. Battles where they should have been destroyed but somehow survived. And even won." Lieutenant Zanzar looked troubled. "But they are so physically weak. No natural armor, no claws, not even particularly strong compared to many species." "Yes," the Admiral agreed. "And that is perhaps their greatest advantage. Because they know they are weak, they never rely on strength. They rely on cleverness, on working together, and on a level of aggression that would shock most species." He returned to his seat, signaling for another drink. "I will tell you about our first real meeting with human military forces. It happened in what they call their year 2157. My 8th Fleet was sent to look into strange activity in the Sigma Octantis system. This was an area recently settled by humans. The Admiral's side limbs moved in an agitated way as he remembered. Our intelligence said Dravid raiders were in the area. Simple pirates, we thought. We expected to find a few human settlements under attack, perhaps already destroyed. Instead, we found 3 Dravid dreadnoughts disabled and floating in space. Lieutenant Zanzar's face ridges turned a different color in disbelief. Dravid dreadnoughts, disabled by human defenses. No, the Admiral corrected. By a single human ship. The UES Dauntless. No one spoke after hearing this. The Dauntless was 1/5 the size of a Dravid dreadnought, with technology at least 1 generation behind Confederation standards. It should have been destroyed in seconds. Instead, it had managed to cripple 3 enemy capital ships. And the Admiral signaled for another drink. We made contact and met their commander, Captain John Rivers, a plain-looking human with a manner so calm it was unsettling. When we said we were surprised at their victory, he simply shrugged and said they had to make do. Kelthorin gestured toward the window where distant stars shined. The Dauntless had no military AI, no quantum weapons, no phase shields. What they had was a crew that refused to accept defeat. Captain Rivers showed me their battle recordings. The Admiral's voice got quieter. The Dravid attacked their colony without warning. Standard tactics: destroy orbital defenses, then send ground forces. But the Dauntless was being repaired in a hidden dock facility. Rather than run away or give up when 3 dreadnoughts appeared, they launched with half their systems not working. One of the younger officers leaned forward. How did they fight? They fought in unexpected ways. The Dauntless did a burn that would have killed most species, speeding up so fast that it strained even their reinforced bodies. They aimed at engine parts with normal warheads, not to destroy but to create fields of debris. Then they used those debris fields as cover to get closer and send what they called boarding teams. They boarded Dravid vessels. The question came from multiple officers at the same time. Yes, while still under fire. In suits that offered little protection, armed mainly with... The Admiral's translator seemed to struggle with the word shotguns. Weapons that shoot. Small metal pieces? Someone asked in disbelief. Simple, yes, but they work well in the tight spaces of a ship corridor, and they terrified Dravid warriors who had never seen such weapons. I watched their helmet recordings. The human boarding parties lost 40% of their people but never slowed down. They captured the first dreadnought's bridge in less than 20 minutes. The Admiral's outer eyes closed briefly. With 1 dreadnought captured, they used its weapons to disable the engines of the others. Classic human approach, they call it divide and conquer. He sat back in his chair, looking at each young officer in turn. This is why I tell you about humans. Not because they are the strongest or have the best technology. I tell you because they are the most dangerous species I have ever encountered. They look harmless, they seem friendly. But when they fight... His voice trailed off, and for a moment, the hardened old Admiral seemed almost afraid. When humans fight, they bring with them thousands of years of being the creatures that would not stop, would not give up, would follow their prey until it could no longer run. Remember this, younglings. Underestimate humans at your peril. The young officers sat in silence as Admiral Kelthorin took another sip of his drink. The story of the Dauntless had left them stunned. The Admiral seemed lost in thought for a moment before he continued. 6 cycles after the Sigma Octantis incident, we got a call for help from Outpost Zenith 7, the Admiral said. It was a science research station near what humans call the Kuiper Belt of their home system. He sat up straighter, his military training showing as he remembered the mission. The outpost had gone quiet. The Confederation Council was worried that important research had been taken. My flagship, the Indomitable, was sent with a human officer to help us, Lieutenant Frank Miller. The Admiral's eyes looked far away. Lieutenant Miller did not look special. He was short for a human with what they call red hair, quiet and respectful. He spent most of the trip studying how our ship worked, asking questions about our weapons and defense systems. I thought he was just curious. Kelthorin. moved his hand, and a picture of Outpost Zenith 7 appeared in the air. We arrived to find the outpost still there, but not answering our calls. Our normal way of doing things said we should send a drone to look first, then a security team if it was safe. Lieutenant Miller asked to join the security team. I had no reason to say no, so I agreed. The Admiral's voice changed, showing a respect that the young officers rarely heard from him. The security team found the outpost's crew dead, not from weapons but from a sickness made in a lab, a bioweapon created by HECTA separatists, and they were still on the station. One of the officers gasped. The HECTA rebellion had been one of the bloodiest fights in recent Confederation history. The HECTA attacked our security team in the main laboratory. 9 of our best Thorin warriors and Lieutenant Miller against 17 HECTA fighters. The HECTA had planned well. They used devices that disabled our advanced weapons. The team was trapped and they could not call for help. The Admiral paused, his eyes seeing the past. What happened next I only know from the report of the one security officer who lived in the station's partly fixed cameras. Lieutenant Miller took charge when the team leader fell. He gathered the disabled weapons and moved back to a narrow service hallway. Thorin showed a map of the area. It was a spot they could defend, but they were surrounded. No way out. The smart choice was to give up. Instead, Miller took apart the disabled weapons and used parts to make simple bombs. He put the wounded behind walls for protection and told each person which area to shoot at. The Admiral's voice got softer. The HECTA attacked in waves. The first wave met homemade bombs. The second ran into walls and careful defensive fire from weapons Miller had partly fixed. By the third wave, they were fighting hand to hand. He turned off the map display. Lieutenant Miller was not a big human. He had no natural weapons, no claws, no poison spikes, no extra strong muscles. What he had was a metal pipe pulled from the corridor wall and what humans call combat training. The Admiral's voice carried a hint of what might have been fear. When we finally broke through the HECTA jamming and reached them, Lieutenant Miller was the only one still fighting. He had many plasma burns, a poison knife wound in his stomach, and was badly hurt all over his body. He stood in a hallway, full of dead HECTA. Behind him, 3 wounded Thorin were still alive. No one in the room made a sound. When our help team arrived, he did not drop his weapon right away. His eyes were not those of a thinking being in that moment. They were the eyes of something ancient and terrible. It took him several seconds to see that we were friendly. The Admiral looked around at the shocked faces of his audience. Lieutenant Miller lived, but barely. When I visited him in the medical bay, I asked why he had not given up when logically there was no hope. He seemed confused by the question. The mission wasn't done, sir, he said, and my people needed protecting. Thorin's side limbs shook slightly. The HECTA had planned to release the bioweapon into Sol's asteroid mining colonies. Millions would have died. Lieutenant Miller's actions stopped this. For his service, he got something humans call the Silver Star. He seemed embarrassed by the attention. The Admiral sat up straight. This was just my first real lesson about humans in combat. The most disturbing thing I learned came during the Krell incursion, when I saw not just their bravery but their ability for calculated ruthlessness. He paused to let his words sink in. The Krell incursion happened in what humans call their year 2172. The Krell, a species not part of the Confederation from the Carina Sagittarius arm, began attacking outer colony worlds. He showed a star map of the area. The Confederation was slow to help. The colonies were far away and not important for strategy, but among them was a human settlement, New Anchorage. About 20,000 humans lived there, small by Confederation standards. The Admiral's face darkened. The Confederation Council talked about sending help. During these talks, the Krell started a full invasion of New Anchorage. We got their call for help, but the nearest Confederation battle group was 3 weeks away. The humans, however, had a small destroyer squadron just 7 days out. Lieutenant Zanzar frowned. A destroyer squadron against an invasion force? Yes. 5 human ships against a Krell war fleet of 19 capital ships. The human squadron was led by Captain Lisa Reeves of the UES Intrepid. When told about the situation, she reportedly said only, "We're on our way," and ended the call. The Admiral changed the display to show battle plans. Our experts predicted total loss of the human squadron. I personally sent a message to Captain Reeves telling her to wait for Confederation support. She said she got my message and kept going. Kelthoran's outer eyes narrowed. What I didn't understand, was that the humans had no plan to fight the Krell fleet directly. They had another plan. The display changed to show the new Anchorage colony. When they arrived in the system, the human squadron split up, following a path that let them send down dropships. They landed about 300 Marines on the surface while the Krell were focused on their ships. One of the officers tilted her head. 300 against an invasion force? What possible difference could they make? The Admiral's voice became very calm. Those 300 humans organized the colonists. New Anchorage was not a military settlement, but it was a hard world that attracted a certain type of human. Resourceful, tough. The Marines gave them weapons, trained them in days, and set up what humans call a guerrilla resistance. The Admiral leaned forward, his eyes intense. "This is the most important lesson I can teach you about humans. They have a saying, adapt, improvise, overcome. When facing greater numbers or superior technology, they don't fight fair. They change the rules of the game entirely." He looked around at the young officers. "In my long career, I have fought many battles against many species. I have seen bravery, skill, and determination from countless warriors. But I have never seen anything like the sheer will of humans when their backs are against the wall." The Admiral's voice grew quiet, almost as if he was speaking to himself. "They don't know when they're beaten, and that makes them the most dangerous species in the galaxy." The holographic display showed the new Anchorage colony as Admiral Kelthoran continued his story. The young officers leaned forward, captivated by the tale of human resistance. The Krell took control of the ground easily, but found they only controlled empty buildings, the Admiral said. Every night the humans would attack targets and then disappear. They destroyed supply centers, damaged communication towers, and ambushed patrols. They used simple but effective bombs triggered by pressure or tripwires. The Admiral's translator seemed to struggle as he continued. Meanwhile, the human destroyer squadron did what they called hit-and-run attacks. They never fought directly, but would appear at the edge of a system, fire a bunch of missiles, and vanish into faster-than-light travel before the Krell could respond well. These were small attacks, causing minimal damage, but they forced the Krell to stay on constant alert. He showed a timeline of the conflict. This continued for 18 days. The Krell became more and more aggressive in their search operations, which was exactly what the humans wanted. They lured Krell patrols into prepared traps. City areas became death traps, buildings set to collapse, intersections turned into kill zones with crossing fields of fire. The Admiral paused, letting the meaning sink in. By the time Confederation forces arrived, the Krell had lost about 40% of their ground forces and 3 capital ships. More importantly, they had lost all order as a fighting force. They were tired, paranoid, jumping at shadows. Kelthoran closed the display. The human civilian deaths were high, nearly 6,000 dead, but they never gave up. Captain Reeves later told me something I will never forget. She said, "Admiral, you should understand that humans don't need to win. We just need the enemy to lose." He looked around at the silent officers. After it was over, I toured the colony with a human officer named Major Paul Carter. I asked him how civilians had fought so well. His answer still haunts me. He said, "Every human is about 3 meals away from becoming a stone-cold killer. We're all descended from top predators who survived ice ages and plagues. Civilization is just a thin cover." The Admiral's side limbs shuddered slightly. But the most disturbing part of human warfare was still to be shown to me. That came during the Battle of Proxima Centauri, when I saw their ultimate weapon. Admiral Kelthoran looked at the young officers, their expressions a mix of disbelief and growing worry. Good. They needed to understand. The Battle of Proxima Centauri happened in 2178, he continued, the peak of the Krell conflict. The Confederation had finally committed its full might to the war, but we underestimated Krell determination. They gathered their entire fleet, over 500 vessels, for a decisive strike against humanity's Alpha Centauri colonies. The admiral brought up a battle map. I commanded the Confederation's First Fleet, 112 capital ships with support vessels. We joined with the Human Defense Fleet, 76 vessels of different capabilities. We prepared a normal defense in depth, with layered formations designed to absorb and counter the Krell advance. His eyes fixed on a point in the display. 2 days before the expected Krell arrival, I was invited to a strategy meeting aboard the human flagship, UES Constitution. Their overall commander was Admiral William Boyd, an older human with gray hair and a manner so calm it bordered on detachment. Kelthoran's posture stiffened at the memory. Boyd listened to our defensive strategy, asked a few questions, then quietly suggested a different approach. He called it Operation Hellfire. When he outlined the plan, I was disturbed. The Admiral changed the display, showing a complex orbital setup. The humans proposed using their civilian mining vessels, 98 ships equipped with powerful drills and fusion cutters designed for asteroid mining. These ships would be loaded with something humans call thermonuclear devices and positioned within the debris field surrounding Proxima Centauri. One of the officers leaned forward. They wanted to use civilian ships as weapons. Yes, the Admiral confirmed. The mining vessels would appear to be hiding, but would actually be waiting. When the Krell fleet engaged our defensive formation, the miners would activate their drives at maximum burn and aim directly for Krell capital ships. Kelthoran's side limbs trembled slightly. I objected, of course, these were civilian vessels, not military. The crews were not soldiers. Admiral Boyd acknowledged this, then informed me that every mining crew had unanimously volunteered when asked. The display shifted to show the actual battle formation. I did not understand humans then as I do now. I thought surely they would reconsider, that their civilian leadership would reject such a plan. I was wrong. Not only did they approve it, but when I expressed my concerns about using civilian vessels, their representative seemed confused. Admiral, she said, in human history, when existence is threatened, there are no civilians. The Admiral's voice dropped lower. The Krell arrived as expected with more ships and good formation. Our combined fleets fought according to plan, appearing to give ground gradually. The Krell advanced into the debris field, focused entirely on our military vessels, the holographic display animated, showing the movement of forces. That's when Operation Hellfire began. 98 mining vessels, each piloted by volunteer crews, activated their drives at the same time. The Krell detected the sudden energy signatures, but classified them as non-fighters trying to flee. Kelthoran's 4 eyes seemed to lose focus as he recalled the scene. The mining ships accelerated to maximum speed on direct collision courses. The Krell realized too late what was happening. Their defense systems were pointed toward our military vessels, their shields set up for energy, weapons, not physical impacts. The display showed the mining vessels closing with the Krell formation. 43 mining ships were destroyed before reaching their targets. The remaining 55 hit Krell capital ships at tremendous speed, exploding their nuclear payloads. On impact, the effect was devastating. The simulation showed massive explosions blooming across the Krell fleet. 29 Krell dreadnoughts destroyed in the first wave. Their formation shattered. While they tried to regroup, our combined military forces executed a coordinated attack on their disorganized fleet. The battle lasted just under 7 hours. The Krell suffered 83% losses. They never recovered as a military power. The Admiral closed down the display. The human casualties were total. All 98 mining ships lost with all hands. 714 humans who were not soldiers, not trained for war, not forced by anything except their own will. Silence filled the officers' lounge. After the battle, I attended a ceremony humans call a memorial service. Admiral Boyd read the names of every mining crew member. It took hours. For each ship, he read a short phrase. They gave the last full measure of devotion. Kelthoran's translator struggled with his next words. I asked a human officer, Commander Steve Martinez, how they could celebrate such a terrible sacrifice. His answer has shaped my understanding of humans ever since. He said, "We don't celebrate the dying admiral. We celebrate that they were the kind of people who would do this for others." The admiral sat straight in his chair, His military bearing fully returned. The young officers remained silent, processing the shocking story of Operation Hellfire. "That, young officers, is why I tell you about humans," Admiral Kelthorin said. "Not because of their technology or their numbers, but because of what they are willing to do. In my long career, I have met many species who will die for duty or honor or even ideas. The humans are the only species I have ever met who will die for each other." He looked around the circle of stunned faces. The Confederation classified humans as a minor species with limited military potential. That is a terrible misunderstanding. They are individually adaptable, collectively resourceful, and have a unique psychology that makes them both incredibly cooperative and terrifyingly ruthless when threatened. Lieutenant Zanzar raised her hand nervously. "Admiral, you've told us 3 stories about human warfare. Are there other incidents that stand out in your memory?" The Admiral's 4 eyes blinked slowly, one pair after the other. "Yes, many. But perhaps I should tell you about the incident at Tau Ceti. It demonstrates yet another aspect of human warfare that makes them unique." He adjusted his position, seeming to gather his thoughts. This occurred in 2183, after the Krell conflict had ended. A group of pirates, a mixed band of outcasts from various species, had established a base in the Tau Ceti system. They were raiding shipping lanes, attacking civilian vessels. The Admiral called up a new star chart. The Confederation dispatched a task force to eliminate the threat. I commanded the operation. We had 14 vessels, more than enough to handle a pirate band. We also had 1 human ship attached to our force, the UES Relentless, commanded by Captain Alan Wright. Kelthorin's outer eyes narrowed at the memory. The pirates had a base on an airless moon, well fortified, with defensive batteries and shields. Our plan was conventional: bombard from orbit, reduce their defenses, then send in troops to clean up survivors. Captain Wright requested a meeting before we began our attack. The Admiral's side limbs moved in an agitated manner. He proposed an alternative approach. Rather than bombard the base, he suggested his ship could deploy a small team to infiltrate the facility. I was skeptical. The base had significant defenses and was built into the moon's regolith, making it difficult to approach unseen. The holographic display showed the pirate base. Captain Wright explained they had developed what they called an Earth glide vehicle, essentially a sled that would allow operators to move across the surface while remaining in physical contact with it. This would generate no heat signature and minimal dust, making it nearly impossible to detect. Lieutenant Zanzar frowned. Why not just use stealth shuttles? The pirates had advanced sensor arrays specifically designed to detect engine emissions, the Admiral replied. The Earth glide vehicles were mechanical, using momentum and low-power electric motors. Primitive but effective for the situation. The Admiral gestured, and the display zoomed in on the base. I was still doubtful, but I allowed Captain Wright to attempt his approach. 6 humans in what they called tactical spacesuits deployed from the Relentless using these glide vehicles. They crossed 15 kilometers of lunar surface completely undetected. The display showed the team's path. They accessed the base through a maintenance airlock. What happened next, I watched through their helmet feeds. The 6-person team moved through the base with extraordinary coordination. They used non-explosive breaching tools to access secure areas. They communicated using a system of hand signals rather than radio transmissions. The Admiral's voice grew quieter. The team reached the base's control center and power core. They planted devices they called EMP charges, weapons designed to emit a powerful electromagnetic pulse. This would disable electronic systems without causing structural damage. Kelthorin paused. This is important to understand. They could have simply destroyed the base. Instead, they specifically chose a method that would disable it while minimizing loss of life. When I asked Captain Wright about this choice, he said, "Dead pirates. Tell no tales, Admiral. We need intelligence more than we need corpses." The Admiral's appendages moved in what the young officers recognized as their species equivalent of a thoughtful nod. The EMPs worked perfectly. The base lost all power and communications. The pirate crews were completely disoriented. Our forces were able to board and capture the base with minimal casualties on either side. We gained access to the pirates' data systems, which led us to 3 more of their hidden bases. He closed the tactical display. What impressed me was not just the success of the mission, but its efficiency. 6 humans accomplished what would have required a full Confederation infantry battalion, with far less risk and better results. When I commented on this to Captain Wright, he simply said it was standard special operations procedure. The Admiral looked directly at Lieutenant Zanzar. This brings me to another key aspect of human warfare. They have a concept they call force multiplication, the idea that a small, well-trained team with the right equipment and approach can have the impact of a much larger force. While most species in the Confederation rely on technological superiority or numerical advantages, humans focus on maximizing the effectiveness of individual soldiers. One of the other young officers spoke up. But Admiral, surely special operations are not unique to humans. Many species have elite units. Yes, Kelthorin agreed. But there is a difference. Most species view such units as exceptional, used, rarely for special circumstances. Humans view this approach as standard. They would rather send 6 perfectly trained operatives than 600 adequate ones. The Admiral's voice took on a lecturing tone. They have a military philosophy that values quality over quantity in a way few other species do. They believe, and have repeatedly demonstrated, that training, adaptability, and initiative are more valuable than numbers or even technology. He leaned back in his chair. This is why I tell you these stories, because someday you may command ships with human crew members or serve alongside human vessels. You need to understand that they do not think like we do. They do not fight like we do. And if you try to force them into our tactical doctrines, you will waste their unique capabilities. Lieutenant Zanzar looked thoughtful. Is that why the Confederation has special protocols for human integration into our forces? Exactly, the Admiral said. Those protocols weren't created to accommodate human weaknesses. They were created to leverage human strengths. He gazed around at the young officers. Remember this. Humans appear physically weaker than most Confederation species. Their technology is less advanced than many, but they compensate through innovation, adaptation, and a level of individual initiative that would be considered insubordination in many of our cultures. The Admiral's voice grew solemn. And remember one thing above all, never push humans to the point where they have nothing left to lose, because that is when they are most dangerous. Admiral Kelthorin looked at his audience of young officers. Their expressions showed that his stories had affected them deeply. Good. That was his intention. I have one final story to share, the Admiral said. One that perhaps reveals the most disturbing aspect of human warfare. What happened during the Arcturus Rebellion? Several of the officers exchanged glances. The Arcturus Rebellion was recent enough that most had heard of it, but the details were classified. The Arcturus system was a human colony that declared independence from their government, the Admiral explained. They seized control of orbital platforms and planetary defense systems. The human authorities asked for Confederation assistance in resolving the situation. He signaled for a fresh drink. I was assigned as the Confederation liaison aboard the human command vessel UES Guardian under Admiral Carol Peterson. She was a veteran of multiple campaigns, highly decorated. I expected her to take aggressive action based on my previous experiences with human military leaders. The Admiral's 4 eyes blinked slowly. Instead, she did something I found puzzling. She opened communications with the rebel leadership. For 3 weeks, she talked with them. Daily conversations about their grievances, their demands, their ideals. I thought it was a waste of time, but she insisted it was essential. Lieutenant, Zanzar tilted her head. A delaying tactic? That's what I assumed, the Admiral said. But it was more than that. During these conversations, Admiral Peterson was learning about the rebels. Not just their military capabilities, but their psychology, their motivations, their relationships with each other. Kelthorin's voice grew softer. She was creating what humans call a psychological profile of the rebel leadership, understanding not just how they fought, but how they thought, what they valued, what they feared. The Admiral straightened in his chair. After 3 weeks, she presented her plan. The rebel leadership had 3 main figures: a former military officer named George Ellis, a political idealist named Diane Harris, and a technical genius named Peter Lee. Together, they formed a balanced leadership triangle. Admiral Peterson's plan was to remove just one, Ellis, the military leader. One of the young officers leaned forward. "Through assassination?" "No," the admiral said sharply. "That was my first thought as well, but Admiral Peterson explained that killing Ellis would make him a martyr. Instead, she wanted to discredit him." Calthorne's side limbs moved in agitation. Using the psychological profile she had developed, Peterson crafted a plan that exploited the hidden tensions between the 3 leaders. Through careful manipulation of communications, selective release of intelligence, and a series of small military feints, she created the impression that Ellis was secretly negotiating with the human government for his own benefit. The admiral's voice carried a hint of reluctant admiration. It worked perfectly. Harris and Lee turned against Ellis. The rebel force fractured along lines of loyalty. They began fighting among themselves. Within days, the rebellion collapsed without the Guardian firing a single shot in direct combat. Silence filled the room. "This is what I find most unsettling about human warfare," Admiral Calthorne continued. "Not their bravery or their adaptability or their sacrifice. Those are admirable qualities. What is truly alien about humans is their understanding of psychology as a weapon." He looked around at the young officers. "In the Confederation, we view warfare as a physical contest. Ships, weapons, soldiers. Humans see it as much more. They study their enemies as thinking beings. They identify psychological weaknesses and exploit them as ruthlessly as any physical vulnerability." Lieutenant Zanzar appeared troubled. "That seems dishonorable." "By our standards, perhaps," the admiral agreed. "But humans have a saying. The supreme art of war is to subdue the enemy without fighting. They consider it more ethical to win through psychological means than through bloodshed." Calthorne's translator seemed to struggle with his next words. "After the Arcturus operation, I asked Admiral Peterson why she chose this approach over a conventional assault. Her answer was very human. She said, 'Because live colonists can still become good citizens, dead ones can't.'" The admiral drained his drink. "This is the final lesson I want you to understand about humans. They are capable of incredible violence when necessary, but they are equally capable of remarkable restraint when it serves their purposes. This flexibility, this ability to shift between extreme aggression and calculated patience, makes them unpredictable in ways that few other species are." Another officer raised a hand. "Admiral, given all you've told us, do you consider humans a threat to the Confederation?" Calthorne was quiet for a long moment. "No," he said finally. "Not as long as our interests align with theirs. Humans are aggressive, yes, but not expansionist by nature. They fight fiercely to protect what they consider theirs, but rarely to conquer what belongs to others." The admiral's posture relaxed slightly. "What I do consider dangerous is misunderstanding them, treating them as just another member species, without appreciating their unique psychology and capabilities. That is why the Confederation treaty with humans has such unusual provisions." Lieutenant Zanzar's facial ridges darkened with surprise. "The restrictions on bioweapon research? The prohibition against targeting human civilian populations?" "Yes," the admiral confirmed. "Those provisions were not designed to protect humans from us. They were designed to protect us from humans." He gazed out at the stars. "Because if there is one thing I have learned in my long career, it is this. Humans make excellent friends and terrible enemies, and which they become depends greatly on how you treat them." The admiral stood, signaling the end of the gathering. "You are the next generation of Confederation officers. Some of you will command mixed crews. Some will work alongside human vessels. Some may even find yourselves facing humans in combat. Though I pray to the ancestral waters this never happens." He looked at each young officer in turn. "When you deal with humans, remember my stories. Remember their persistence, their adaptability, their willingness to sacrifice, their understanding of psychology as a weapon. Remember that they rarely think or act as we expect them to. Admiral Kelthoran moved toward the exit but paused for a final remark. And remember one last thing. A human commander once told me this, and I have found it to be universally true. Humans can forgive an enemy who fights honorably. They will never forgive one who doesn't. As the Admiral left the officers' lounge, the young officers remained seated, their usual chatter absent. Each was lost in thought, contemplating the stories they had heard and the species they now understood a little better, and perhaps feared a little more. Lieutenant Zanzar was the last to leave. As she stood at the viewport, looking out at the stars where human worlds turned in their orbits, she wondered which she would rather have, humans as allies or as enemies. The answer was obvious, but it led to a more troubling question. What would it take to turn them from one to the other? She didn't know, but she was certain of one thing. She never wanted to find out. The massive control room of the Galactic Hegemony's border outpost buzzed with activity. Screens covered the walls, showing stars, planets, and the occasional ship passing through their territory. The hegemony had ruled this part of space for thousands of years. They were made up of 12 advanced alien species who believed they were the most intelligent beings in the galaxy. Lieutenant Zixpar, a thin, blue-skinned alien with 4 arms, stared at his screen with growing concern. His upper right hand tapped a series of buttons while his lower hands gripped the edge of his workstation. "Commander, I'm detecting an unknown vessel entering Sector 7, Zixpar called out, his voice high and warbling. "It's not matching any known design in our database." Commander Vextol, a tall purple-skinned alien with ridge-like growths running down his back, moved quickly to Zixpar's station. He leaned forward, his 6 eyes blinking in sequence as he studied the readings. "Send the data to Admiral Krasthul immediately," Vextol ordered. "This could be a new species or perhaps a new design from the Meridian Collective." Within minutes, Admiral Krasthul's massive form appeared on the main screen. His gray-scaled skin and yellow eyes gave him a fearsome appearance, enhanced by the ceremonial armor he always wore. "Report," he growled, not bothering with greetings. Vextol straightened his posture. "Admiral, we've detected an unknown ship entering our territory. Its technology appears quite advanced, faster than light capabilities, energy readings suggesting powerful engines, and what might be weapon systems." "Send me the visual data," Krasthul demanded. When the image appeared on his screen, the Admiral's eyes narrowed. The ship was sleek and white with blue markings along its hull. On its side, strange symbols were painted. USS Dauntless. "Run those markings through our language database," Krasthul ordered. A moment later, Intelligence Officer Lithmar stepped into view beside the Admiral. "Sir, those markings are from Earth. They're in a human language called English," the Admiral made a sound like rocks grinding together, the hegemony equivalent of laughter. "Humans? Impossible. They're still a primitive species fighting over resources on their home planet. They barely have the technology to reach their own moon." "Our information might be outdated," Lithmar suggested. "The last detailed study of Earth was nearly 70 cycles ago. Even so, no species advances that quickly." Krasthul dismissed the idea with a wave of his clawed hand. "The ship must be stolen technology, or perhaps another species trying to confuse us." Lithmar didn't look convinced. "With all due respect, Admiral, I suggest we investigate this thoroughly. If humans have advanced this rapidly, they could pose a significant threat." "Very well," Krasthul said reluctantly. "Dispatch a scout fleet to intercept the vessel. I want to know who is really operating it." Meanwhile, aboard the USS Dauntless, Captain Frank Miller walked through the gleaming white corridors of humanity's most advanced starship. At 45, Miller had gray hair at his temples and lines around his eyes from years of service. But there was still a youthful excitement in his step as he made his way to the bridge. This mission was historic, the first official diplomatic contact between Earth and an alien civilization. After years of observing the galactic hegemony from a distance, Earth's United Space Command had decided it was time to introduce themselves. The bridge doors slid open silently. The room was spacious, with workstations arranged in a semicircle facing a large view screen. Through it, stars streamed by as the Dauntless moved at speeds that would have seemed impossible just 50 years ago. "Status report, Commander Rodriguez," Miller said as he took his seat in the captain's chair. Executive Officer Alan Rodriguez turned from his console. His dark hair was cut short, and his uniform was crisp and perfectly pressed. "All systems running at optimal capacity, Captain. We should reach the Hegemony border outpost in about 2 hours." "Perfect," Miller nodded. "And our diplomatic package?" "Ready to transmit," said Communications Officer Gary Wilson, a stocky man with a friendly face. "Cultural briefings, historical records, scientific achievements, everything the diplomats thought would make a good first impression." Science Officer Lisa Bennett looked up from her station, her brow furrowed. "Captain, I'm detecting active scans targeting our ship, very powerful ones." "Already?" Miller raised an eyebrow. "I didn't expect them to notice us so quickly." "It seems they have better long-range sensors than we anticipated," Bennett replied, pushing a strand of blonde hair behind her ear. "And, based on the scan patterns, they're trying to analyze our technology." Rodriguez leaned forward. "Captain, should we activate the cloaking system? We don't know if their intentions are hostile." Miller considered this for a moment. "Let's not appear too threatening on our first meeting, but we should be prepared." He tapped a button on his chair arm. "Engineering, this is the captain." "Clark, here," came the response. Chief Engineer Susan Clark's voice was steady and confident. "Susan, prepare the cloaking system, but don't activate it yet. I want it ready at a moment's notice." "Already on it, Captain," Clark responded. "I've been monitoring those scans. They're quite primitive compared to what we've dealt with before, but surprisingly thorough." Miller smiled. Earth had encountered other civilizations during its secret explorations, some friendly and some not. Those experiences had pushed human innovation forward at an incredible pace. "Security status?" Miller asked. Security Chief Paul Johnson, a broad-shouldered man with a perpetual serious expression, responded immediately. "All defensive systems ready but inactive, sir. Shields are on standby and can be raised in 1.2 seconds. Miller nodded. "Satisfied? Good. Let's proceed as planned. I want to make a good first impression, but I'm not taking any chances with the safety of this ship and crew." The view screen suddenly changed, showing a formation of small ships approaching. "Captain," Wilson called out, "we're being hailed." "Put them through," Miller ordered, straightening in his chair. The screen flickered, and the scaled face of a hegemony officer appeared. His yellow eyes widened slightly as he saw Miller. "Unidentified vessel," the alien said, his translator converting his speech to English. "You have entered galactic hegemony space. Identify yourselves and state your purpose." Miller stood, his posture straight and dignified. "This is Captain Frank Miller of the United Earth vessel USS Dauntless. We come in peace, seeking diplomatic relations with the galactic hegemony." There was a pause, and Miller could see the alien conversing with someone off-screen. When he turned back, his expression was skeptical. "You claim to be human?" the officer asked, disbelief evident in his voice. "Yes," Miller replied simply. "Impossible," the alien stated. "Humans do not possess this level of technology. You will power down your systems and prepare to be boarded for inspection." Before Miller could respond, Rodriguez leaned over and whispered, "They're targeting weapon systems on us, Captain." Miller's expression remained calm, but his voice took on a harder edge. "I'm afraid we can't allow boarding at this time. We are on a diplomatic mission and—" "You will comply," the alien interrupted, "or face the consequences." Miller glanced at Rodriguez and gave a subtle nod. "Now, Engineer Clark," Rodriguez said into his communicator. In an instant, the Dauntless vanished from the hegemony sensors. On the bridge, Miller watched as the alien officer's expression changed from arrogance to shock. "Let's move to a safe distance and reassess," Miller ordered. "It seems our first contact isn't going exactly as planned." As the Dauntless silently slipped away, The hegemony fleet frantically searched for the ship that had disappeared before their eyes. The humans had made quite an entrance, but this was just the beginning. Admiral Krazathul paced back and forth in the grand meeting chamber of the Hegemony High Council. The circular room was filled with representatives from all 12 species that made up the galactic hegemony. They sat on raised platforms, looking down at the central area where Krazathul now stood. The ship simply vanished, Krazathul said, his scaled hands clasped behind his back. One moment it was there, the next it was gone. Our sensors detected no movement, no energy surge, nothing. Hi, Counselor Zorvan, an ancient being with pale translucent skin and glowing eyes, leaned forward. And you still believe this cannot be a human vessel? Impossible, Krazathul insisted. We have monitored Earth for centuries. 70 cycles ago, they were still using primitive combustion engines to reach their own moon. No species advances that quickly. Military leader Drevkor rose from his seat. His species was known for their forearms and red skin covered in bony plates. Then who could it be? The ship had human markings. A deception, Krazathul said firmly. Perhaps the Arcturians or the Meridian Collective, trying to confuse us by using human symbols. Cultural anthropologist Vex Nara stepped into the center of the room. Unlike most hegemony officials, she had actually studied humans extensively. Her slender form and large eyes gave her a gentle appearance despite the authority in her voice. With respect, Admiral, I believe we should consider that these might indeed be humans, she said. We've intercepted their broadcast signals for years. Their entertainment shows them to be incredibly imaginative. Their history shows rapid development compared to most species. Krazathul scoffed. Their broadcasts also show them fighting with primitive projectile weapons and combustion vehicles. They bicker constantly over resources and territory. Vexnara nodded. Yes, but remember, those broadcasts take time to reach us. What we see might be decades old. Even so, Krazathul argued, the technology on that ship was beyond anything we would expect from humans for at least another 1,000 cycles. Intelligence Officer Lithmar stepped forward. Perhaps they had help, or perhaps they stole the technology. The council chamber erupted in discussion, with some members arguing for immediate military action and others calling for caution. High Counselor Zorvan raised a hand, and silence fell immediately. We must learn more, find this ship again, discover who truly controls it. If by some miracle these are actually humans, we need to understand how they advanced so quickly. Captain Frank Miller sat in his ready room adjacent to the bridge of the USS Dauntless. The small, comfortable space allowed him to think in relative quiet. On the wall screen he could see the hegemony ship still searching for them. The door chimed softly. Enter, Miller called. Executive Officer Alan Rodriguez and Science Officer Lisa Bennett walked in together. They're still looking for us, Rodriguez said, gesturing to the screen. They've sent 4 more scout ships to join the search. Miller nodded. They seem quite determined. Bennett placed a tablet on Miller's desk. I've completed my analysis of their scan data. It's interesting, Captain. Their scanning technology is actually quite limited compared to ours. They're using an outdated form of quantum resonance imaging that we abandoned 30 years ago. Miller picked up the tablet and studied the data. So they're not as advanced as we thought? In some ways, yes, Bennett said. They have impressive faster-than-light travel capabilities, but their sensor technology, weapon systems, and shield generators seem almost primitive compared to what we've developed. The captain leaned back in his chair. That explains their reaction. They can't believe a primitive species like us could advance this quickly. Rodriguez crossed his arms. So what's our next move, sir? Continue with the diplomatic mission or retreat and report back to Earth Command. Before Miller could answer, his communicator beeped. Captain, came the voice of Communications Officer Gary Wilson. I've been monitoring their communications. They're having some kind of high-level meeting about us. They genuinely don't believe we're human. They think we stole the ship, or are pretending to be human to confuse them. Miller couldn't help but smile. Well, that's an interesting development. There's more, Wilson continued. They've dispatched what looks like a science vessel along with several warships. They're planning to capture us for study. Miller's smile faded. That complicates things. The door chimed again, and Chief Engineer Susan Clark entered without waiting for permission. Her normally calm demeanor was replaced with obvious excitement. "Captain, I've been studying their propulsion technology from the scan data. It's fascinatingly inefficient. They're using a form of space-time manipulation that we experimented with briefly before developing our current quantum drive. I estimate they're operating at about 60% of our efficiency." Miller considered this information. "So we not only have better cloaking technology, but we're faster too?" "Much faster," Clark confirmed with a grin. "And their weapons, they're still using directed plasma energy. We moved beyond that decades ago." Security Chief Paul Johnson's voice came over the communicator. "Captain, the hegemony fleet is expanding. Their search pattern, they're getting closer to our position." Miller stood up. "All right, let's show them a little of what we can do, but not too much. Susan, I want you to drop the cloak just long enough for them to spot us. Then engage the standard drive, not the quantum drive, and move to a new position. Let's see how they react." "Playing cat and mouse, Captain?" Rodriguez asked with a small smile. "Something like that," Miller replied. "Let's head to the bridge." On the Hegemony flagship, Admiral Krazathul watched as the mysterious ship suddenly appeared on their sensors. "There," he shouted. "Track it, don't lose it this time." But before their weapons could lock on, the ship accelerated away at incredible speed. Unlike before, it didn't disappear. It simply moved faster than their ships could follow. "Impossible," Krazathul muttered. "Speed readings indicate they're moving at least twice as fast as our fastest vessels." Lithmar studied the readings with growing concern. "Admiral, I'm beginning to think we should consider that these might actually be humans." "Nonsense," Krazathul snapped. "They must have stolen this technology. No species advances from primitive spaceflight to this level of technology in just 70 cycles." The ship appeared again, this time closer to the Hegemony fleet. It seemed to hover there as if inviting observation. "They're hailing us," a communications officer reported. Krazathul hesitated, then nodded. "Put them through." The image of Captain Frank Miller appeared on the screen. He looked calm and professional in his blue and silver uniform. "Greetings, Admiral," Miller said politely. "I believe we got off on the wrong foot. We truly are human, and we truly come in peace. Would you care to start over?" Krazathul's eyes narrowed. "If you are human, explain how you developed this level of technology so quickly." Miller smiled. "We're quick learners, Admiral, and highly motivated. Perhaps we could meet in person to discuss this further." "A trap," Krazathul muttered to Lithmar. The intelligence officer whispered back. "Or an opportunity to learn more." Krazathul turned back to the screen. "Very well. We will send a delegation to your ship." "Excellent," Miller replied. "We look forward to welcoming you aboard the Dauntless. Please limit your delegation to 5 representatives. We'll transmit docking instructions shortly." As the communication ended, Krazathul turned to Lithmar. "Prepare a team, armed but discreetly. I want to know everything about that ship and its crew." "And if they truly are humans?" Lithmar asked. "Then," Krazathul said, his voice low, "the Hegemony faces a threat unlike any we've encountered before." The Hegemony delegation prepared to board the human vessel. Admiral Krazathul had selected 4 others to join him: Intelligence Officer Lithmar, Cultural Anthropologist Vex Nara, Military Strategist Dorn Vex, and Chief Scientist Rilnak. Each wore formal attire with hidden weapons and scanning devices. "Remember," Krazathul said quietly as they approached the docking port, "observe everything. We need to determine who really controls this ship." "And if they truly are humans?" Vexanara asked. "Then we need to know how they advanced so quickly," Krazathul replied. "No species jumps from primitive rockets to this level of technology in just 70 cycles unless they had help, or stole it." Dornvex, a large alien with ridged armor-like skin, grunted in agreement. "If humans have advanced this rapidly on their own, they represent a serious threat. Such quick technological development suggests dangerous unpredictability. Their shuttle docked with a slight bump. The airlock cycled, and the door slid open to reveal Captain Frank Miller waiting with 3 of his officers. "Welcome aboard the USS Dauntless," Miller said with a smile. "I'm Captain Frank Miller. This is my executive officer, Alan Rodriguez, science officer, Lisa Bennett, and security chief, Paul Johnson." The humans looked exactly like the images from Earth broadcasts. 2 males and 1 female with varying skin tones but the same basic features. They wore crisp blue and silver uniforms with small insignia on their chests. Krazathul stepped forward. "I am Admiral Krazathul of the Galactic Hegemony. These are my associates." He introduced each member of his team briefly. Miller nodded politely to each visitor. "We've prepared a tour of our vessel, followed by refreshments and discussion in our conference room. Please follow me." As they walked through the ship's corridors, the Hegemony visitors tried to conceal their interest in the advanced technology surrounding them. The lighting was different from Hegemony ships, softer but more efficient. The air circulation systems were silent but effective. Even the door mechanisms seemed more advanced, opening and closing with barely a whisper. "How many crew members serve on this vessel?" Lithmar asked casually. "We have 120 personnel aboard," Miller replied. "This is a diplomatic vessel, so our crew is smaller than our military ships." "And this is just one of your fleet?" Dornvex asked, his voice carefully neutral. Miller smiled. "We have several ships of this class, yes. The Dauntless is our newest model, launched just 6 months ago." Chief Scientist Rilnock, who had been scanning everything discreetly with a device hidden in his sleeve, whispered to Krazathul, "Admiral, these readings confirm the technology is real and functioning. This isn't a facade." Krazathul frowned, but said nothing. The tour continued to the medical bay, where the delegation met Dr. Olivia Martinez, the ship's chief medical officer. She showed them medical technology that made even Rilnock's eyes widen in surprise. "This cellular regenerator can heal most injuries in minutes," Martinez explained, demonstrating on a small cut on her hand. The wound closed instantly, leaving no trace. "We've nearly eliminated death from physical trauma." Next came engineering, where Chief Engineer Susan Clark proudly showed off the ship's propulsion systems, or at least the parts they were willing to reveal. "This is our standard faster-than-light drive," Clark explained. "It allows us to travel at approximately 300 times the speed of light." Rilnock couldn't contain himself. "But that's faster than any known technology except for the ancient precursor artifacts." Clark smiled politely. "Is it? How interesting." The final stop before the conference room was the bridge. The delegation stood at the back, observing as the crew worked at their stations. Through the large view screen they could see the Hegemony fleet holding position nearby. "Your ship is impressive," Krazathul admitted reluctantly. "But I still find it difficult to believe humans developed this technology independently." Miller turned to face the Admiral directly. "Let's discuss that over refreshments, shall we?" In the conference room, human servers brought in drinks and food suitable for both species. Once everyone was seated, Miller activated a display on the wall. "I understand your skepticism, Admiral," he said, "so I'd like to show you something." The display showed a timeline of human technological development. "This is our history of space exploration." The Hegemony delegation watched as the timeline progressed from early rockets to the current era. "As you can see," Miller continued, "we went from our first orbit of Earth to landing on our moon in just 12 years. Within another 50 years we had permanent bases throughout our solar system. And then what?" Vexanara asked, genuinely curious. "Then we discovered something that changed everything," Miller said. "During mining operations on Mars, we found evidence of an ancient visitation. Not a Hegemony species," he added quickly, seeing Krazathul's expression. "Something much older." Rilnock leaned forward. "The precursors?" Miller nodded. "We believe. So, we found no technology, just information, scientific principles we hadn't yet discovered. It accelerated our development dramatically." Krazathul's eyes narrowed. "So you did have help." "Not help," Science Officer Bennett corrected. "Just information. The achievements are still ours. We took basic principles and developed them in ways even the precursors hadn't imagined. Dornbeck suddenly stood up. Admiral, this confirms my concerns. If humans can advance this quickly with just a hint of precursor knowledge, they are too unpredictable and dangerous to be allowed free travel in hegemony space. Before Krazathul could respond, alarms blared throughout the ship. Security. Chief Johnson pressed his hand to his earpiece, listening intently. Captain, he said urgently, 3 more hegemony battleships just arrived. They're powering weapons and demanding our surrender. All eyes turned to Krazathul, who looked as surprised as the humans. This is not my order, he said firmly. I am the fleet commander. Miller's expression hardened. Then it seems someone is acting without your authority, Admiral. Communications. Put the hegemony ships on screen. The wall display changed to show a hegemony commander. His scaled face showed only contempt. Human vessel, the commander said. By order of military high command, you will power down all systems and prepare to be boarded. Your technology will be claimed for the hegemony. Resistance will result in your destruction. Miller looked at Krazathul. Is this how the hegemony conducts diplomacy, Admiral? Krazathul stood up, clearly angry. Commander Brak-Ven, stand down immediately. I am conducting diplomatic negotiations with these humans. Your authority has been temporarily suspended, Admiral. Brak-Ven replied coldly. The High Command believes you have been too lenient with these primitives who clearly possess stolen technology. You have 5 minutes to leave their vessel before we open fire. The screen went dark. Krazathul turned to Miller, genuine regret in his eyes. Captain, I did not authorize this, but I suggest you surrender. Our battleships are the most powerful in the galaxy. Miller exchanged glances with his officers, then smiled slightly. I don't think that will be necessary, Admiral. It seems we'll need to demonstrate a bit more of our capabilities than I had planned. He tapped his communicator. All hands, battle stations. Activate defensive systems, but weapons remain on standby. Let's show our guests what humans can really do. The bridge of the USS Dauntless hummed with focused energy as the crew prepared for the coming confrontation. Captain Frank Miller stood calmly at the center, watching as the 3 hegemony battleships positioned themselves in attack formation. Shields, at maximum, Security Chief Paul Johnson reported. All defensive systems online. Admiral Krazathul and his delegation stood at the back of the bridge, watching with a mixture of concern and curiosity. They had refused to return to their shuttle, partly out of honor and partly out of desire to see what the humans would do. Your ship cannot withstand the firepower of 3 hegemony battleships, Dornbeck said quietly. Each one carries enough weaponry to destroy a small moon. Miller glanced back with a small smile. We'll try to avoid damage to your vessels, but I can't promise anything. Krazathul stepped forward. Captain, let me contact them again. Perhaps I can reason with High Command. By all means. Miller gestured to the communication station. Before Krazathul could reach it, the ship rocked slightly. The lights dimmed, for a fraction of a second, then returned to normal. Warning shot, Johnson reported. They've targeted our propulsion systems, shields holding at 98%. Executive Officer Rodriguez looked up from his console. They're charging weapons for a full barrage, Captain. 2 minutes until they fire, Communications Officer Gary Wilson added. Commander Brak-Ven is demanding our immediate surrender. Miller nodded calmly. Engineer Clark, activate the quantum displacement drive. Lisa, prepare the multi-phase shields. Science Officer Lisa Bennett's fingers flew over her console. Multi-phase. Shields active, Captain. They won't know what hit them. From the back of the bridge, Chief Scientist Rilnak whispered. Quantum displacement, multi-phase shields. These technologies are theoretical at best. The next moment, the hegemony ships opened fire. Brilliant beams of energy streaked toward the Dauntless from all 3 battleships. The human crew remained calm as the energy weapons struck their shields. Shields holding at 97%, Johnson reported casually, as if being fired upon by 3 warships was an everyday occurrence. The hegemony delegation stared in disbelief. Their most powerful weapons had barely affected the human ship's defenses. Impossible, Dornvex muttered. Those weapons should have vaporized your shields instantly. Multi-phase technology, Bennett explained, not looking up from her station. Your weapons are powerful, but they're operating on a single energy frequency. Our shields adapt and phase shift to neutralize the specific attack pattern. Miller turned to Clark. Engineer, demonstrate the quantum displacement drive, please. With pleasure, Captain, Clark replied with a grin. She pressed a sequence of controls on her console. What happened next left the hegemony delegation speechless. The Dauntless seemed to flicker, and suddenly there were 3 identical ships where one had been. How? Krasthul began, but couldn't finish the question. Quantum displacement, Bennett explained. We're not actually creating copies. We're existing in multiple quantum states simultaneously. Each version is equally real, while the drive is active. Outside, the hegemony fleet was thrown into confusion. Their sensors showed 3 identical human vessels, each seemingly solid and real. Commander Brackven ordered his ships to fire at all 3 targets. The energy beams passed harmlessly through 2 of the images and struck the shields of the real Dauntless, which absorbed the attack with minimal effort. Shall we return fire, Captain? Johnson asked, his hand hovering over the weapon's controls. Miller shook his head. No, let's try something else. He turned to Communications Officer Wilson. Open a channel to all hegemony ships. Wilson nodded. Channel open, sir. Attention hegemony vessels, Miller said firmly. This is Captain Frank Miller of the USS Dauntless. As you can see, your weapons are ineffective against our defenses. We have not returned fire because we truly come in peace. I urge you to stand down before this situation escalates further. On the main screen, Commander Brackven's scaled face showed a mixture of rage and disbelief. This is some trick. No ship can withstand that level of firepower. Miller sighed. Engineer Clark, please demonstrate our maneuverability. Clark nodded and entered a new sequence. The Dauntless suddenly vanished from its position and reappeared directly behind the lead hegemony battleship. As you can see, Commander, Miller continued, if we wish to attack, you would already be destroyed. Now I suggest we all take a step back and discuss this situation rationally. On the bridge of his ship, Commander Brackven was receiving frantic reports from his crew. The human vessel had moved faster than their sensors could track. It now sat less than 100 meters behind them, in perfect position to attack their engines, their most vulnerable point. Impossible, Brackven whispered. He turned to his second-in-command. Are they truly humans? Scans confirm human life signs, Commander, the officer replied, his voice shaking slightly. They appear to be exactly what they claim to be. Meanwhile, on the Dauntless, Admiral Krasthul moved to stand beside Captain Miller. For the first time, he regarded the human with genuine respect. It seems I was wrong about your species, Captain, he admitted. The hegemony has clearly underestimated humanity. Miller nodded. A common mistake, Admiral. We found that most species do. Lithmar stepped forward. If I may ask, Captain, why reveal yourselves now? If you possess this level of technology, you could have remained hidden from us indefinitely. Miller turned to the intelligence officer with a thoughtful expression. Isolation isn't our goal. Humanity wants to join the galactic community, to trade, to share knowledge. We just wanted to make sure we could do so as equals, not as subjects. The communications console beeped. Wilson looked up. Captain, we're receiving a transmission from the Hegemony High Council. They're requesting to speak with both you and Admiral Krasthul. Miller glanced at the Admiral. Shall we take this together? Krasthul nodded. I believe that would be wise. The main screen changed to show High Counselor Zorvan. The ancient alien's glowing eyes widened slightly at the sight of Miller standing side by side with Krasthul. Admiral, Zorvan said carefully, our sensors show some unusual readings from the human vessel. Would you care to explain what is happening? Krasthul stood straight, his posture formal. High Counselor, I must report that we have severely underestimated the human species. Their technological development is genuine and far beyond what we anticipated. I have witnessed capabilities that match or exceed our own best technologies. Zorvan was silent for a moment, absorbing this information. Finally, he turned his gaze to Miller. Captain, it seems we have much to discuss. I formally invite you and your senior officers to meet with the High Council at our central world, Hegemony Prime. Miller smiled. We would be honored, High Counselor. And what of Commander Brackvin and his ships? They will stand down immediately, Zorvan replied, with a sharp glance off-screen that suggested Brackvin was already facing consequences. And, Captain, would you be willing to share some of your technological insights with us? Miller exchanged glances with his officers before answering. Some, yes. Others, we'll keep to ourselves for now. I hope you understand. Zorvan nodded. Slowly. Indeed. It seems humanity will be a most interesting addition to our galactic community. We look forward to your arrival. As the transmission ended, the bridge fell silent. Then Rodriguez turned to Miller with a small smile. Well, Captain, it looks like our first diplomatic mission is back on track. Miller nodded. Set course for Hegemony Prime, maximum safe speed. Let's not keep the High Council waiting. As the Dauntless prepared to depart, the Hegemony delegation watched with new eyes. No longer did they see humans as primitive upstarts. Now they saw them as something far more significant and perhaps far more dangerous equals. The USS Dauntless approached Hegemony Prime, a massive planet with 3 moons and sprawling cities visible even from orbit. Captain Frank Miller stood on the bridge, looking at the spectacular view on the main screen. After their show of force, the Hegemony had provided them with an honor escort of 5 ships. Quite a change from trying to blast us out of space, Executive Officer Alan Rodriguez commented quietly. Miller nodded. Nothing earns respect faster than showing you don't need it. The Hegemony capital was a city of towering spires and sweeping arches, built with materials that sparkled in the planet's golden sunlight. The Dauntless landed at a central spaceport where a large reception committee waited. Ready for real diplomacy? Miller asked his senior staff as they prepared to disembark. Science Officer Lisa Bennett adjusted her uniform. After everything else, this should be the easy part. Security Chief Paul Johnson wasn't so sure. I still think we should bring more security, Captain. A show of trust is important here, Miller replied. Besides, I doubt they'll try anything after what they've seen of our capabilities. The landing ramp extended, and Miller led his team out. Admiral Krazathul waited at the bottom, alongside High Counselor Zorvan and a group of officials from various Hegemony species. Captain Miller, Zorvan greeted them, his translucent skin glowing slightly in the sunlight. Welcome to Hegemony, Prime. Miller bowed slightly. Thank you for your invitation, High Counselor. We look forward to productive discussions. As do we, Zorvan replied, though some of the officials behind him looked less enthusiastic. Please, follow me to the Grand Council chamber. As they walked through the capital city, humans and aliens alike observed each other with curiosity. The streets were filled with members of all 12 Hegemony species going about their daily business. Many stopped to stare at the humans, creatures. Most had only seen in intercepted broadcasts from Earth. The Grand Council chamber was an enormous circular room with a domed ceiling that showed a real-time view of space above the planet. Hundreds of delegates sat in tiered seating, while the High Council itself occupied a raised platform at the center. Miller and his team were given seats of honor near this platform. Zorvan called the session to order. Esteemed delegates of the Galactic Hegemony, today we welcome representatives from Earth. Recent events have demonstrated that the human species has advanced far beyond our previous assessments. A murmur ran through the chamber. Not all of it sounded welcoming. A delegate from one of the more militant species stood. High Counselor, we must address the danger here. If humans have advanced this quickly, who knows what weapons they might develop next? Perhaps we should consider preventative measures. Miller tensed slightly but kept his expression neutral. Johnson's hand moved closer to his concealed sidearm. Admiral Thule surprised everyone by speaking up immediately. I once shared those concerns, but having witnessed human technology firsthand, I must say this. If they wished us harm, we would already be defeated. This caused an even louder murmur. Thule was known as one of the most cautious and paranoid military leaders in the hegemony. Furthermore, Thule continued, they had multiple opportunities to destroy our ships, yet chose restraint instead. This suggests wisdom alongside their technological prowess. Zorvan nodded. Well said, Admiral. He turned to Miller. Captain, perhaps you could share with the Council how humanity advanced so rapidly? Miller stood and walked to the center of the chamber. Thank you, High Counselor. The simple answer is necessity and diversity. Humans have short lifespans compared to many species, so we're driven to accomplish things quickly. We're also incredibly diverse in our thinking. Where some see competition as wasteful, we've found it drives innovation. He activated a small device that projected images above the chamber floor. This is Earth just 200 years ago. The images showed primitive steam engines, horse-drawn carriages, and simple ships, and this is Earth now. The images changed to show sprawling cities, advanced spacecraft, and peaceful crowds of humans from all races working together. We've had our struggles, Miller admitted. Wars, environmental crises, social upheavals, but each challenge forced us to adapt and improve. Cultural anthropologist Vexenara stepped forward. If I may, Captain, our studies show humans were constantly fighting among themselves. How did you overcome this to unite your world? Miller smiled. We looked up. He pointed to the stars visible through the dome. When we realized what was out there, our differences seemed smaller. Not gone, we still debate and disagree, but we found common purpose in exploration. Chief Scientist Real Nuck couldn't contain his curiosity any longer. And the quantum displacement drive? How does it actually function? Our theory suggests such technology should be impossible. Engineer Susan Clark, who had been quiet until now, laughed softly. That's what our scientists said too, until someone tried anyway. Sometimes the difference between impossible and possible is simply refusing to accept limitations. For hours, the discussion continued. Human officers answered questions about Earth culture, technology, and history. Gradually, the tension in the chamber eased as the hegemony delegates began to see humans not as a threat, but as potential allies. Finally, Zorvan raised his hand for silence. I believe we have heard enough to make a decision. The High Council proposes a formal alliance with Earth to include cultural exchange, scientific cooperation, and mutual defense. All in favor? The vote was not unanimous, but the majority glowed their approval lights. Miller and Zorvan moved to a small table where a treaty had been prepared. This is just the beginning, Zorvan said as they signed the document. There is much our civilizations can learn from each other. Miller nodded. That's why we came. He glanced at his team. Humanity doesn't want to conquer or dominate. We've learned those lessons the hard way in our own history. We simply want to explore, to learn and to grow alongside others. Later, as the human delegation prepared to return to the Dauntless, Admiral Thule approached Miller privately. There's something I must know, Captain, he said quietly. We've seen impressive technology today, but I suspect you haven't shown us everything. Miller looked at the Admiral thoughtfully. Let's just say the quantum displacement drive isn't our newest innovation. Thule nodded slowly. I thought as much. Your restraint is reassuring. We've learned that power without wisdom is dangerous, Miller replied. That's a lesson we're still learning, to be honest. Perhaps you can teach it to the hegemony as well, Thule suggested. Some of our species have grown complacent over the millennia. As the humans boarded their ship, Rodriguez moved beside Miller. Well, Captain, mission accomplished. First contact established, treaty signed, and we didn't even have to fire a shot. Miller smiled as they walked onto the bridge. The best kind of victory. Where to now, sir? Asked the navigation officer. Miller looked at the starfield on the main view screen. Set course for home. Earth will want a full report." He paused, then added, "And after that, there's a whole galaxy out there waiting to meet us." As the Dauntless lifted off from Hegemony Prime, species across the galactic hegemony began updating their databases. Humans, a young species with remarkable technological advancement and unexpected wisdom. Approach with respect. The ship that the Empire had spotted, the ship they had refused to believe belonged to humans, had changed the course of galactic history forever.